Harvest moves ahead with great conditions in the field. Welcome to Grow. The latest crop progress report shows 15% of corn has been picked, ahead of 10% normally at this time. Topsoil and subsoil moisture continues to be a concern. Specifically with topsoil, 50% is short to very short. Corn continues to rate mostly good to fair. Soybean harvest sits at 14%, just slightly ahead of schedule. 60% of winter wheat is now planted, well ahead of 37% last year at this time. Pasture and range conditions continue to rate mostly fair. And recently at Husker Harvest Days, we got an update on the corn we've been growing in North Platte as part of the TAPS contest. You've got some other things, estimating yield.
Yeah, diseases, identifying those. We've got some insects down there. The new thing this year would be satellite and drone imagery, taking a look at an image, trying to figure out what's wrong in the field. And that's been kind of interesting.
That's something I've gotten to do as a TAPS participant. I'm growing some corn with Chuck's contest this year, and to get to look at some of that imagery, I got a soil moisture probe. I've been making management decisions based on some of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of the goals of TAPS, is to provide the technology, have producers get comfortable with using that in a TAPS field, and then adopting it on their operations back home, be more efficient, more profitable.
Right. So that corn, though, unfortunately, we got a little wind and hail event this summer, didn't we?
We did, yeah. We lost about half of the leaves, so we're expecting maybe a 30% yield loss, but we'll know here in about a month when we harvest.
Well, that's a real-world competition.
It is, yeah. I mean, 1 out of 7 years we got hailed, so maybe that's the average for our area.
Yeah, I suppose. So, yeah, if you've been following along, I've been growing a little plot of corn out there, so I've been out to check it a couple of times, so I guess I'm curious to come by and see you on the combine and see how things look in a few weeks.
Yeah, it is hailed, so the stalks got damaged too, so we want to get a harvest early, so, you know, get it out of the field before it starts to fall over.
Grand Island may have a mega site primed for new investment, much of it related to agriculture, and a new rail system may be the key to making that happen.
This country, for half a century, just didn't invest the way we should have in railroads.
America fell behind. That's the assessment of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who says the nation needs to invest in its aging rail network.
Safety win, supply chain win, and a jobs win.
Buttigieg visiting Nebraska, as a Grand Island business will benefit from $15 million to upgrade this one-of-a-kind rail network 20 miles through the former Cornhusker Army ammunition plant.
Once we get a short line rail in here, then you can seamlessly go between the Burlington Northern tracks and the Union Pacific tracks.
It just puts Grand Island on the map differently for opportunity and growth.
Grand Island may be positioned to attract new industry that needs rail access, while also being located in an area that's both near a metro population, but will never have houses around due to the legacy of contamination from the ammo plant.
You can build the largest facility in the country here. We can handle it, we can interchange it, and we've got the land and the space to support it.
Southern Power has been working to locate industry here, but ran into challenges.
And we've always been able to tell projects that we do have rail out here, but it was always really hard to get access to it. So this is going to open up doors for projects that are really needing rail access, either to bring in raw materials or ship their goods out.
Already, one company is in the initial phases of building nearby. GMCO plans a fertilizer facility.
As a new fertilizer product that draws on old proven tactics for increasing plant yields.
Cathcart Rail has around 100 employees and plans to add a dozen more. Related industry could result in another 40 jobs. Plus, they anticipate new development, both diversifying into new areas and building on a strong foundation in agriculture.
It's no accident that this railroad is called the Cornhusker, and we know that the products that are moved here, both agricultural products directly and then manufacturing that is related to the ag sector, they really depend on those supply chains, and that's part of why short line railroads are so important to America. We're investing in them just like we are in the larger Class 1 freight railroad assets, and that has to happen because it supports so many jobs.
Foreign investment in the United States is nothing new, but recent investments by China are raising concerns. Whether it's the Chinese government or Chinese corporations, experts are raising security concerns. Recent attempts by the Chinese to purchase farmland near military bases in particular has put the issue of state ownership in the news. The Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska held a webinar this past week digging into the issues. You can catch that full webinar by going to cap.unl.edu. And Senator Deb Fischer questions the USDA, saying China is looking for ways to exploit its ownership of American farm ground.
To get the information we need, I think we're all looking at foreign-owned land, foreign renters of land, and I specifically am looking in certain vulnerable areas across this country. Do you have any ideas how we can differentiate on the reporting requirements so we're not putting undue burdens on citizens in this country?
You know, Senator, I think the issue is very complex here. It is self-reporting. It's on the books. It should also be known. We've been doing a lot of robust education with the realtor associations, various individuals that are within knowledge of deeds, making sure that our county offices, our state offices, we'd be more than willing to work with senators to be able to provide a toolkit if you want to be able to provide it to your respective communications to be able to report. So as we're moving forward, to be able to, ad-lib what the secretary said, there's not necessarily a foolproof way to be able to go. So we can do the work that we need to do at USDA in one part of the system, but the other systems throughout the country and the infrastructure for us to be able to pull a report, and we can rely on colleagues like such as Mr. Pittman and Dr. Ortega and other entities, but we do have multiple structures and a complex system that needs to be created to be.
Broken Bow is an agricultural powerhouse, and as the school district unveils plans for a $26 million bond issue, they're trying to prepare kids for careers in agriculture without putting too much financial burden on farmers and ranchers. Shop class could spark an interest in a future career, but Broken Bow Public Schools has to limit how many kids can weld at a time. And even 25 years ago, Logan Govier says there were problems.
It was really hit or miss whether some of the welders were working properly. And
he supports a $26.5 million bond issue to expand career and technical facilities.
If we can get some of this stuff updated, more well-rounded, hands-on.
School board members say ag, welding, and metal shop account for 2/3 of the new space they want to build.
From what we have to what we're proposing to go in is night and day difference. I think we'll really see an improvement, and we'll be able to educate our kids even better.
It comes 2 years after voters rejected a larger plan.
Found out that brand new wasn't the way to go is kind of what I learned from it.
So we went back to the drawing board.
The superintendent says they didn't hear negativity before the last bond, so we're surprised when 60% of voters said no. He was also disappointed how low turnout was, under 40%. They're stepping up outreach to show it's a no-frills project.
It doesn't have the extras.
These school board members make their living from pigs and cattle. They need skilled grads, but also want to limit the impact on taxpayers. In their favor, a new state law that says farm ground is valued at 50% when paying school bonds. Plus, changes in school funding that see Broken Bow go from $100,000 in state dollars to over $1 million a year.
That only helps our project, helps our case here.
In fact, the superintendent says it's possible the tax levy could go down. The project would also create a main entrance, transform a gym into an auditorium, and make HVAC and roof repairs. Logan Govier says it's a plan focused on his tax concerns as a farmer, while more importantly, giving his own kids the education they need.
They're being really responsible with the money, and we're getting what we need.
Last week's Exarban Stock Show, seeing the most people pass through the gates since that event made the move to Grand Island. The show, which moved to GI in 2017, broke the 40,000 mark in attendance for the first time, with 40,003 people coming to the 4-day event. Participants from 13 states and Nebraska are eligible to participate in the Exarban Stock Show each year. This year marked the 96th edition of Exarban, which moved from Omaha to GI in 2017. 4 citations on record following a deadly explosion at a Wood River ethanol plant. 49-year-old Jody Norgard was killed in the April blast, according to the fire marshal. Now, a preliminary inspection from OSHA says Green Plains has been penalized more than $42,000 for serious violations. OSHA says precautions weren't taken to eliminate sources of ignition, and cutting or welding was permitted in the presence of explosive atmospheres. The citations say suitable extinguishing equipment was not maintained and a permit was not filed. The report says workers were using a handheld angle grinder to cut the bolts off the access door located on the top of the whole stillage tank when the explosion happened. It also indicates the inspection is not closed and information could change. Later, kids get their hands in the mud for a lesson on soil health. Up next, we head to Custer County for an update on harvest.
This portion of NTV's Grow is sponsored by Acres Equipment, solutions for every field. Acres has what you need to get the job done.
Well, he's pulled Logan Govier down off the combine here in Custer County, and you're week 1 of harvest here.
Yeah, we just started cutting soybeans on Monday, and things have been going pretty well. You can see the bottoms have yielded really fairly well. You get into the hillsides, the heat and lack of moisture, even under irrigation, we were having a problem keeping up on the hillsides where the little bit poorer soil. But things are drying down halfway decent, and we're making progress.
The weather's been great as far as getting out there in the field.
It has, and the forecast continues to look pretty good. So we're going to keep plugging away as quick as we can, and hopefully be done before we get into some snow.
There you go. You guys pretty typical, corn, beans, but maybe you do a few extra things as well.
You know, we try to rotate in some other crops. We've raised kidney beans in the past. That's kind of hit or miss how often we do that, but every year we try to rotate in 200-300 acres of yellow field peas and cereal rye, usually in that same ballpark, 300 acres or thereabouts. So a little bit more diversity than a lot of people around here.
Before you know it, I guess you'll be picking some corn.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times we do harvest some wet corn and take it to Adams Land and Cattle, and this year we were just really heavy on soybeans, so our soybean harvest a lot of times overlaps with wet corn, so it's a bit hit or miss which you decide to give up a little bit of extra income. You know, we like to harvest the soybeans as close to 13% moisture as possible, but if you're getting into wet corn, knocking out 1,000 acres of that, then you get into soybeans. Now you're down to 8%, a lot more shatter, a lot more loss. So it's a give and take, but this year's being heavy on soybeans, we can fit all of our corn in the grain bins and haul it later.
Our Grow Weather Outlook is next.
NTV's Grow Weather is sponsored by Acres Equipment, solutions for every field. Acres has what you need to get the job done.
Well, this week's drought monitor was released earlier this week on Thursday morning. Of course, with last week's rain, very nice to see some improvements, especially across Nebraska. Kansas even got a couple of slight improvements as well, but still very dry across the Central Plains, as has been the case for a while now. Of course, get a close look now at the state of Kansas, where no drought, now at about 18.5%, abnormally dry, roughly 81.5%. Both of those, unfortunately, a 0.5% decrease, but it was nice to see some rainfall across Kansas the last week in areas we needed it the most. The rest of these categories got some improvements, which is nice to see. Moderate drought now at 64.25%, a 2.5% improvement from last week. Severe drought now at 45.5%. Extreme drought, roughly 20.5%. Both of those, roughly 1.5% an increase from last week, or improvement. And exceptional drought still about 1.65% there across parts of southeastern Kansas. So some improvements, nice to see there across Kansas. More of the same here across Nebraska. No drought now at 35%. Abnormally dry at 65%. Both of those 4% improvement from last week, which is very nice to see. Parts of southwest Nebraska improving the most with all that rainfall. Moderate drought now at 44.75%, a 3% improvement there. Severe drought roughly 27.25%. Extreme drought 14% there. Both of those roughly 1.25% improvements from last week. And the exceptional drought now at about 4.65% still across parts of eastern Nebraska. Still could use a lot of rain there, but a slight improvement over the last week, about 0.1%. Temperatures here for the month of October looking very average, at least across Nebraska and Kansas. Really anywhere else you look, very well above average, especially in southern and eastern, even some northern areas well above average. But looking at average temperatures for October, precipitation, this is nice to see as well. Much of Kansas expecting above average precipitation for the next month, and really all of Nebraska in slightly above average precipitation totals, maybe with the exception of the very northern sliver of the state. Temperatures the next 3 months, expecting very average temperatures really across the central plains of Nebraska and Kansas, expecting that. Warmer temperatures off to the west and to the east, and precipitation for the next 3 months as well. Maybe some above average precipitation expected for the extreme southern part of Kansas. Otherwise, average precipitation totals are expected for the next 3 months. Your Grow Almanac for the week ahead. Normally we see a high of around 72 and a normal low around this time, about 46. The week ahead averaging just a little warmer, although I will forewarn you, hotter towards the start of the week, much cooler by the end of the week. 74 the week ahead average high, the week ahead average low, roughly about 54. And you'll see these inflated numbers here towards the beginning of the week. 88 for a high tomorrow morning. We'll see temperatures decrease as we head throughout the middle of the week anyway. The storm chance coming through on Tuesday, along with a very strong cold front. It's going to drop those temperatures quite a bit by the middle part of the week. Might see temperatures try and climb a little bit towards the end of the week. Rain chances both tomorrow, mostly on Tuesday, and a little bit maybe Wednesday morning as well. Otherwise dry after that. Your Grow proverb for the week: if October brings much frost and wind, then January and February will be mild. Of course, the frost season fast approaching. We'll have to wait and see when that first frost will be here before sooner rather than later. That is a check of your Grow weather report this week. Be sure to stay tuned next week when once again it'll be time to grow.
We love to see your photos. Go to nebraska.tv and send to Chime In. Kids love mud, but they're getting messy in the name of science. We'll see what they're learning about soil health. Protecting soil and water is serious business, but it can also be child's play.
All right, let's go.
Rockets blast to the sky, powered by nothing more than water. Nebraska sits on a vast aquifer critical to agriculture, wildlife, and our communities.
I think they're trying to teach us about how protecting the earth and how things can be important.
If we didn't have soil, then we wouldn't have the trees, and it would just like mess up our whole ecosystem and the water we drink, and it's like it helps us.
Did the contamination get down into your aquifer?
Yes.
Contamination isn't theoretical, but something local regulators deal with.
We definitely have increasing trends of nitrates across the district. We have 30 management areas that we're currently monitoring. We have 3 areas that are over the threshold for nitrates.
Nebraska scientists say rising nitrate levels are linked to cancer. The Lower Loop Natural Resources District is considering new regulations on commercial fertilizer applications, but first giving farmers a chance to be good stewards.
We wanted to work with the producers and they wanted to work with us. That was a big project where we were looking at basically nitrate movement through the soil profile.
Okay.
And while they work daily to educate farmers, this is about the next generation.
And get their hands dirty and enjoy our first annual Mudfest.
Kids measure water and build aquifers they can eat.
That was probably my favorite.
While also seeing the critters that depend on rivers and wetlands.
We talked about why it's so important, the different diverse ecosystems. And
if this happened in real life,
Some of these kids come from farms and see up close how critical natural resources are. Others live in town, and a day in the Arboretum gives them a new perspective. Whatever their background, those in the business of conservation say we can all learn to protect our groundwater.
It all starts with the youth and on up to producers and all of us alike, and it takes urban and, the rural areas alike.
Reporting in Ord, I'm Steve White.
NTV's Grow is brought to you by Aurora Cooperative. Tougher together, Aurora and you.